Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast, the live version with us here, and thanks for joining us. We just had some audio problems, so hopefully you can hear us now. It looks like it's registering on our end, so let us know if you have any issues. But yes, thanks for joining us live. We missed you guys after having a week off, and we were out in Leadville, and I hope you enjoyed that episode that we did from that idyllic cabin. Thanks to Mark, the TrainerRoad user, that lent us that cabin. It's pretty awesome.
Let's mention him again on the real podcast because I'm not sure if he listens to this one.
Cool. Yeah, we'll do that. So it was an amazing location and a pretty gnarly race for you, Nate. We'll get into all of that stuff in a bit here, and that's going to be the majority of what we'll talk about today, going through the different things that we learned at Leadville, Nate's experience, our experience, Chad and I as crew members, thanks to Brandon, also the TrainerRoad user that joined us for that, and to help out. That was awesome. But anyways, we're going to get into that. And you know how we usually answer your questions after this podcast? Well, we'll also be looking through them live during this episode when we're talking about Leadville. So if you've ever been to Leadville and raced, or if you've ever been to Leadville and not raced, or you just have curiosities about Leadville or Nate's experience or anything else, you can send in those questions and I'll be actually looking through those, and then we can work them in live when we're going through everything that we talk about Leadville. After the podcast, we'll still answer the other questions that you've submitted live through Facebook and YouTube. So you can join us for that and stick with us, of course, after we record the typical podcast. But with that, I think that we're ready to start the proper podcast. Mm-hmm. Cool. Welcome to the podcast. It's dedicated to making you a faster cyclist, the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. I'm Coach Jonathan Lee with our head coach, Chad Timmerman.
Hi, everybody.
Our CEO, Nate Pearson.
Hello. And
we are here to answer more of your cycling and triathlon-related questions, and also talk a lot about what we did last week, more specifically what you did, Nate. Race Leadville. Chad and I didn't really do anything.
We did stuff.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. We supported. We were the support crew there. So we're going to talk all about things that we've learned as support crew members for endurance races, also specifically about Leadville, and then, of course, what Nate has learned in his process of preparation and execution for Leadville, and hopefully what we can get out to all of you are different, takeaways that you can apply even if you aren't racing Leadville, even if you don't race mountain bikes. Some of them, sure, of course, will apply and be contextual to that, but plenty of the stuff we'll be able to spread it out. So we'll also be answering some of the questions that you've submitted at trainerroad.com/podcast. And you can also join us live. Remember that every week when we record this. It's usually Thursday mornings at 8 a.m. Pacific. And you can join us on our Facebook or YouTube channels. You can just search for TrainerRoad and find that. If you want to talk to the other fellow podcast listeners, you can do so at the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast Facebook group. Tons of conversation and people helping people out constantly within there. So you can join there. With that, should we just kick things off?
Okay, mile one.
Got 104, right?
Very detailed.
Before we get into that, maybe we should talk just a quick thing about travel to the race.
Well,
we can recap, because even though we've talked about it before, we can recap.
And we actually, thanks to all of you users out there, we get a lot of new listeners every week.
Yes.
So people might not know what Leadville is.
That's a good idea.
Or what we were doing. Mm-hmm. Brief overview. 104-mile mountain bike race. They say it's the Leadville 100, but they lie to you. Those last 4 miles, it's 104. It's like 103.8 or something like that.
Yeah.
It starts at 10,000 feet in Leadville, Colorado. It goes down to 96, 9,200, and it goes up to 12.4, I think.
Cool. That's really high.
Yep.
And it's kind of broken down into, because one thing that Chad and I found is that it can get really hard to keep it straight as far as what part of the course a person's talking about. Mm-hmm. It's kind of broken up by aid stations, and that's how we'll end up kind of breaking it up, I assume, right?
Yeah. I was really confused until about a day before the race. So I'll try to not use all the Leadville term a little bit, but also the kind of just general terms. So to get, it's a you have to either lottery or qualify for the race, because there's so many people who want to do it that they don't have enough room for everyone. I believe 2,000 people do it. Mm-hmm. Leadville, very small mining town. Mm-hmm. It's a square mile, right? Yeah, surprisingly good food we found there.
Yeah, it was good.
We've been to other small, and coffee. We've been to other small towns, and it's not so good.
Super nice people too, and all the restaurants and coffee shops. Just nice folk.
Yeah, fantastic. And so I went out a week early to try to acclimate to the elevation. Mm-hmm. And I was all by myself for a week, and I stayed at a user's cabin, Mark.
Yes.
Jonathan?
Thank you, Mark. It was amazing. It was like peak Jonathan. I'm a mountain dweller, and this was like everything for me.
I thought it was amazing. Good. It was a real log cabin. But Jonathan loses his mind over this stuff. And he actually got up early
forest setting
just to hang out in the cabin by himself.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
And we saw a moose that was like 8 feet tall, like 50 yards out, which kind of scary because they will kill you. And then lots of deer and other animals.
It was amazing. And it was just pulled back enough from town. It was like a 10-minute drive, you know. It was pretty close. But it was just perfectly silent. It was super relaxing.
To see it in the last episode that we did live, or not, were recorded, you can go on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TrainerRoad, and you can see the log cabin in the background.
It's a legit log cabin.
In the winter, they can't drive to it. They have to snowmobile in, that's pretty cool.
It's pretty
awesome. I like that. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. That was awesome.
Thanks, Mark.
Another actually thank you, and this is a bit preemptive, but thank you to Brandon, TrainerRoad user who joined us and helped crew for you. It helped make us like a well-oiled NASCAR pit crew.
Yeah.
So
we only barely missed Nate one time.
It's true.
Story's coming.
That was our fault.
So Brandon, the whole reason why this race is hard, like it's not technical. I think it could actually be, like if it was nowadays, it could be a gravel race. When we did Sagan Fondo, the shirt I'm wearing, it had more, that was more technical, like that boneyard section, than Leadville. Yeah. There's one fast descent, it's called Sugarloaf, that you kind of need suspension on because there's so many bumps, and it would be really hard to do that on a cross bike unless you're really good. Yeah. I would still ride it on a mountain bike, but it could be a gravel race. Right. Just so everyone gets context.
And in the past, did they specifically stipulate they could not use a cross bike or drop bars?
Yeah, so I swear I've read that.
Yeah, I thought so too.
And that was, I think that where I read that was in Specialized prepping Todd Wells for this. They were like, we're doing everything that we can short of putting drop bars on the bike because that's not allowed. So that's when he was running like road pedals and road shoes. And
so maybe they've softened on that rule, or a couple people just broke the rules because we saw three or four cross bikes. Yeah,
I saw someone on a cross bike go right by me.
Yeah. And also, I should mention though, even in there's one feed section that we were going through that's just a really long straight section, and it had a lot of rock in there. And I remember seeing how rough it was for those folks on those bikes versus those on mountain bikes with even bigger volume, comfortable tires.
And my perfect bike. So, again, new listeners, I'm not a very good bike handler. Jonathan's excellent.
Perhaps relatively speaking.
I'm getting better.
He's getting much better.
You didn't look like a fish out of water at all.
Yeah. So on this course, after riding it, my ideal bike would be the Frankenstein bike, a very light hardtail mountain bike frame with front fork, and then put on drop bars on it, where I have the shifter that is integrated into a dropper post, and I would still want a very big dropper post on that mountain bike because I have a lot of seat posts showing. It helps a lot. So actually being able to, because there's so many flat sections on this, that you want to be aero, like almost like you're on a road bike.
And with greater drop that you would have by having drop bars on there, it's even more important to have more drop out of your seat post, right? Since there could be situations where you're dropping your torso lower than it would be otherwise.
And I rode the S-Works Epic that has like the brain, and I had that 2 clicks back from fully locked. And to me, that's a good balance where I can get out of the saddle and kind of climb, and it doesn't bob, but it bobs pretty early when I hit something. And that was also very good. And I don't think I lost time because of it. Having that other setup would probably save me 4 or 5 pounds, which would be that would be pretty nice.
Yeah. What size tires would be on your Frankenstein bike?
For this race, I rode the 2.3. It's 2.35 or 2.3.
I think 2.3s, but they do look a little fat.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just because you have 25 millimeter internal width rims that are pretty wide for cross-country standards. But
so I have the Roval ones, 25 millimeter internal rims. On the front, I had a Racing Ralph, the Attic Speed Compound, which is 2.35. And if you went to the bike shop, they only sold in the Schwabies Racing Ralphs. They had a million of them.
Why is that significant, though? We should cover why you feel that's significant.
I think because if you don't know the tire for the area, go to the bike shop. And the bike shop should have the tires for the area. Yeah, they didn't have really gnarly Schwabies, right? I think like the Magic Mary or something. And like when we went to Roslyn, I believe, did we go to bike shop there?
No, but that place would be all Magic Marys, some dirt bike tires.
Exactly. They wouldn't carry those kind of other tires, the racing tires. In the back, I had the Thunderbird, which is like a file tread in the middle and kind of like stuff on the side. Going around, I was the only person I saw that had that tire, and I think it was the tire combo perfectly for me. Absolutely right.
So that would make your Franken bike.
That would.
Okay. Yeah. Something I think And, you know, I think it's always important, especially to have front end traction. You know, you don't want that to lose or to go out from underneath you. But I really do think that I saw very few people on the tires I expected to see. I expected to see a lot more, you know, semi-slick kind of tires, kind of like the Thunderbird is, where it's in the center, super tiny knobs, and then on the side it has a little bit more. But kind of like a tire that was really just focused on rolling fast, but if, you know, has the insurance of a little bit bigger side knobs. And I expected to see more of that on the pros. That's absolutely what I saw.
Yeah.
And some really, you know, slick tires all around on the pros. But on a lot of amateurs, I saw some pretty gnarly tires. But there's this race perhaps more than, I don't know, maybe any other mountain bike race I've seen has like a super wide range of abilities. Like you have people that are pretty darn close to beginner, technically speaking, riders. That are riding this, and then all the way up to world champs like Alvin Licata up at the front. So you have a pretty wide range.
So I did tire research, and I asked everyone. And I was there a week ahead of time, and I would go into town. And thanks to all the listeners, like, you might think you're bothering me. You're not. I'm, like, so bored by myself. And I get to, like, hang out with people, and it feels like we're friends right away. And, you know me, and I talk to you, and we have, like, interest in biking. But the tires that I saw that people liked, Aspens. So a lot of people did Aspens because of you, and people rode it. And pre-riding, they like the Aspens.
This is such a good tire.
Max's Aspens. A lot of Icons, or they would do like an Aspen and an Icon or two Icons. And then Ardent Race. Ardent Race and an Icon. Ardent Race up front. That is, and then the Vittoria Mezcals.
Mezcal,
Mezcal. Yeah, those are kind of like the set of tires that I saw.
Right.
And to each your own. Again, I think a little bit, if I was going to go Maxis, I'd probably go Aspen, just because there wasn't really a lot of slide out opportunity. There was one going down one turn, really fast, wide fire road. I just weighted it wrong, and my back end kind of slipped, but I kept it up.
If I feel like the Icon is useful when you have a little bit looser terrain, because the knobs have some for the tires, some pretty decent knob height, so then they can kind of get down into stuff. But otherwise, I don't. The one big Achilles heel of that one is that it doesn't have a lot of predictability. You kind of feel like you're leaning over, then suddenly you have no traction. Whereas with like something like the Aspen, something like even the Thunderbird is great at this from Schwalbe, you really get a lock-in where you feel like, okay, that's my point of traction, can't go any further. So, I was surprised to see a lot of Icons there. But then again, I guess just a lot of people just pick the Icon and go with it.
So for other people who want to go to elevation, this is my experience. And it's going to be different for everybody. So I talked to some other people, and there's other people that have the same experience as me. So maybe it's part of the bell curve. I'm not sure. Part of the middle of the bell curve. I went there on Sunday. Monday, rode. It was awesome. Wednesday, rode. I didn't think I was going to be able to finish the race. It was so bad. And then Saturday, it felt good again. So that kind of 7 days was or 6 days.
Enough time to make a difference.
Exactly. Yeah. And for me, I'm so glad we did that, because the original plan, it would have put me right in that really bad, like
the lowest trough.
Exactly.
Ooh, that would have been rough.
And if I look at, we have a little table that we got on the internet of different studies of how much aerobic power you lose at elevation. And so coming into this at, 4,200 feet?
Yeah. Closer to 45. Yeah.
My FTP 330, right around there, doing hard workouts at that. Sometimes failing the hard workouts at that if I'm not like mentally set or too tired. So I think that's accurate. If you were to downgrade me according to these tables to sea level, I'd be 356. But at 10,000 feet, I'd be 300. And I think before I said I thought I was 275. On race day, 300 is probably pretty
accurate.
Pretty accurate, yeah. Cool. So so when people know, sea level to 10,000 feet, 50 watts.
Pretty massive hit.
Right?
Yeah. Huge hit. So and this is all kind of based off of that Team Sky study. We saw some people
not study,
just the sharing of information that they did.
Yeah.
That's an important distinction.
Specific to high level athletes.
Just about that
high watts.
Being there, you don't. The thing we've always heard is you got to be either 3 weeks or 1 day, but no one really gave you details about everything else. Like, what if you're there for 22 days?
Yeah, exactly.
Is that good?
Yeah.
And the Team Sky guy said that 7 days was actually a pretty big improvement over 1 day.
Yeah. Good to see. So I guess, do we want to... one quick thing, just I'm going to get some stuff out of the way. We use the bike and jetpack because a lot of people tend to ask us like what we used. So you use the bike and jetpack to ship your bike.
And it fit my extra large Epic in.
Yeah.
We had to turn around the fork though.
Yeah, so you get kind of creative on how you can do that. And there are ways to stash a really big frame in there. And you just take the derailleur off for sure on that sort of situation too. But that was pretty easy to do. And then coming into the race, can we talk about your nutrition stuff before we get into the actual race? Because Chad and I mean, we've mentioned this before. It's always very impressive how much food Nate can eat. Yeah. But this actually
every time.
This was a new bar.
Every time. I know.
I was like
I don't know how he's going to outdo himself next time.
I know. Because Nate, at one point, guys, he was like feeling sick and like kind of head down at the table, like feeling like, oh, I've just eaten so much. And it was late and he had already eaten a seriously impressive amount. Like every meal was more than I eat in a day. And then he gets it's pretty late at night, and then I see him grab a box of cereal.
He taps out. He's like, I'm done eating. I cannot eat anymore.
Yes.
And then we go out on the deck, and we look in, and he's working his way through an entire box of cereal.
The whole thing, guys. and he was so sad. He just looked so sad because he was just shoveling food down.
It's the most joyless eating I've ever ever.
There's no joy in this.
No. But what was your intent behind all that?
All right, so I've done carb loading research a while back, and I forget what episode we posted it in, but there's different ways to load. Some people do it for a full week. Some people deplete and then load. From what I read, they kind of all get you to the same spot. And I find that it's not really easy, but 2 days of carb loading is pretty good, and I've done that before, so I wanted to repeat that same thing.
Yeah. And you stuck with the same 10 grams per kilogram of body weight?
Yeah, and on the other podcast, I was wrong. I'm 84K, like 186.
Just 840 grams of carbohydrate.
I actually did a little more than that.
Over 4,000 calories of just carbohydrate.
I did the first day I did like 900 or 950, somewhere in there.
Gosh. So I mean, and for a point of reference, if people don't know, usually like the average that they recommend for an average person, and this is a very vague thing because everybody is slightly different, but they usually say somewhere around 2,000 calories is like what a person might burn in a day. So this is like you're doubling that in just carbohydrate in a single day.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Granted, you would also take in a little bit more though, just because you're a taller person than most, so you have more muscle that goes through more. But
thanks for noticing.
Doesn't 6'6", but not enough to account obviously for that.
And I try to do it through like whole foods, brown rice, sweet potatoes, stuff like that. Next time I do it, it's just too hard because the amount of volume of food is gigantic. And when I ate that box of cereal, it was like a Honey Bunches of Oats style organic one from Whole Foods.
Yeah,
that was 1,500 calories for the box, plus the milk that I put in, and that was so much easier to eat than 1,500 calories of brown rice.
Yeah.
That is like just pounds of brown rice.
Seriously.
I did bad math. I guess it's 3,200 calories for 800 grams, but that's
a lot.
I did more. I did 907.
Okay, so yeah, let's just go with 4,000 then.
So anyways, the idea was it's going to be a long race. Yeah. I want to load my muscles with glycogen.
Yep. Yeah, and one thing that we noticed that kind of backed this up was we were looking at splits ahead of time, like predicted splits that basically said if you're going to do an 8-hour time, an 8.5, a 9, 9.5, that sort of thing, this is where you should be along the course at specific times, like how far through the race. And we looked at it, and our minds were kind of blown because from the last aid station to the finish, it was a huge amount of time.
Yep.
And abnormally so. It shouldn't have been that long.
Because they expected people to pace poorly and to hemorrhage time over the latter half of it, or the latter third.
I think they just look back at on average times
historical
and
what data,
happens, and everyone just blows up.
Yeah,
but no one eats like me, guys.
And that's also it could be poor pacing, and it could very well be poor hydration and poor nutrition.
Yeah.
And in the previous episode with Alex Grant, which we can spoil his result, I think.
Spoil it.
I think that he got a 6:37 or 6:36, so absolutely thoroughly impressive, riding pretty much alone the entire day too, because somebody at this race threw out a bunch of thumbtacks, and I mean so many that there was a guy with 13 of them in his front tire.
Was riddled.
So they were flat little thumbtacks, and they affected a lot of the early riders that came into the first aid station. It was some spot before the first aid station, so kind of a bummer that happened. But they went into Alex's tire, and he had to drop in a CO2. And that distanced him, and he never really got back on for the rest of the day, rode solo. And his dad, which we later found out was pretty complicated, couldn't get to him in time for the feed stations. So he actually missed the feed zones too.
Oh, no.
He basically had your trip up power line.
Yeah, and he was completely alone and had to get a bottle. One guy had a similar situation, that we know, Justin Mock, really fast road racer that did this for the first time. And I think that he finished still, I think maybe just over 7. But he ended up running out of water, and he saw a random bottle that flew out of somebody's cage, and he just took the risk of grabbing it because he was so thirsty and so out of it. So,
wow.
So, but yeah, still, Alex Grant, 38 years old. Is that right?
I think so, yeah.
And a father of 2, business owner, still manages to work in all the training and everything else to do 6:30. Mm-hmm. That was absolutely amazing.
And he got 7th overall.
7th overall.
And that's with like world-class full-time pros doing this with no jobs.
Exactly. Like,
that's crazy.
Thoroughly impressive, man. So kudos to him. And if you haven't seen the previous episode, you should definitely check it out. Alex isn't just like a pro that says you just got to put in the miles. Like, he analyzes stuff and fully understands it. There's some seriously valuable information in that episode. So, okay. Where do we want to start?
Mile 1.
Okay.
Just kidding. No, I just want to say one more thing before, and then the rest of it will go a lot faster than this, because this is important information. And when you go to Leadville, you stress about this stuff, and it does, I think, apply to other races too.
Yeah, totally.
Corral stuff. Yeah. So there's the gold corral. So when you have so many people, 2,000, you start in different corrals, like you would in a marathon or something like that.
Yep.
It goes gold, silver, red, green, and then I forget the ones after that. Purple, blue, something white.
Can I add a clarifying point?
Yeah.
These are not actually corrals. I thought that they might actually be, and I thought that would be really cool.
Because it's
we're in
Leadville.
an old West mining town, and there are no corrals. Big letdown. So
okay.
Yeah. So anyways, yeah.
Sad day.
So I qualified for the green corral.
Mm-hmm.
Got in there, and I don't know. It starts out cold. It was so nice having you guys where I could throw stuff to you.
It was cold, man.
Cold.
It was freezing.
Was it like 35?
Yeah, it was in the mid 30s, and very cold. And man, there wasn't a whole lot of like excited energy as much as very cold energy. I think that we saw.
It was a very sedate atmosphere.
Everyone was just freezing cold and kind of, I think worried about what was lying ahead.
Sure.
What happens in high elevation is in the mornings it's very cold, and then it can get very hot.
Yeah.
Later on.
And when you're at that high of elevation, that sun feels brutal. Chad and I got crispy red from that one. So
there was some debate before about how much power I should do up the first climb, because I wanted to be in a good group. Because how this race goes is it goes climb, 90 minutes of flattish in a group, and then a very big climb.
And then you turn around and do that again.
Yep. So the first climb, I was like thinking 275, maybe 300 up it. Because of the amount of people that were stuck in like 2 lanes going up, I wanted to do 275 or more, and I actually did 230, just because everyone was
That's what everyone was doing around you.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, and it was basically a single lineup, couple lines up.
2 lines, yep.
Okay, yeah.
And occasionally there would be the pass hole, who you go up and there's 400 people ahead of you, and they will kind of elbow you to get one spot ahead.
Bumping bars trying to move up one spot.
Exactly. Yeah, and then just doing that to somebody else, and then causing someone else to slip out.
Yeah.
And then everyone has to stop.
You brought up a good point about that it's not just like you're expending extra energy in terms of pushing the pedals harder,
which is one vote against it.
Yeah, but then there's other aspects to it too, right? I mean, like you're really wasting a ton of energy, a ton of focus,
and you're out there with a lot of other people. I mean, be just a bit considerate.
Yeah, and think about it too, like a 9-hour race, that's going to be very draining mentally speaking.
You're not going to win it on that first climb.
Yeah.
Especially starting in a green corral with 400 people in front of you.
You can emotionally exhaust yourself or add to that toll, fill that pot already up on the first climb. You got 9 hours left probably or more, like you got a long day, just relax, go stress free for a bit. It does sort out, right? I mean, sure, you can get, like, if you're really far back, don't get me wrong, that could be bad. But we saw some people with, like, what's the furthest back corral?
White.
We saw some white number plate people that were pretty far toward the front, actually. In fact, I think there was a white number plate guy that finished under 7.5 hours or 8 hours.
Yeah,
so
coming through the first aid station, he had moved up already
a ton. Yeah. So, like, you can move up. This race has plenty of room to do it. You don't have to freak out about it.
After the first climb of the descent, it kind of opens up more, and there's a road climb on asphalt, and then there's more. So, anyways, climbing up that, the next climb, I put out more power. I think it was like 254 and moved up a bunch of spots. One thing I want to say, we're going down this famous climb called Power Line.
Yeah, or descent and a climb.
Well, the climb is famous, and I was going down the descent on this.
Yeah.
And it's very rutted. And the person in front of me was, I'd call him cautious. A cautious descender.
Yeah.
He was descending technically, like he didn't look crazy.
Yeah.
But he was going slow, and it's very steep and loose.
Yeah.
And remember, this is like 2 hours into a 9-hour race.
Yeah.
And I was behind him, and then the people behind were like heckling him.
Really?
Like come on, like, kind of like, what are you doing here? You know, and
come on.
don't do that, especially on this part. It's like a 2.5 minute descent of the really like stuff where you can't pass.
Let it roll.
Let it roll. And I even said it. I'm like, you should have pedaled harder. Like,
yeah.
If you want to be in front of those people, go.
It's on you, man.
Have more fitness, right?
Exactly right.
And I wasn't yelling at you when you were slower in front of us on the single track, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There's no place for that, especially at an event like this.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So don't be that person. Just chill.
Yeah.
And wait. And know that you should have, just like in John says all the time, in mountain biking when it's single track, you should have started harder.
Yeah, should have, man. Yep. That's just kind of how it goes.
And this wasn't a spot where you could just pull off, because it's like 30% pitches down and there's no spot to pull off. And you can see that it's like a minute.
Yeah.
Just chill.
You just sit in and relax. At most, you're going to gain a handful of seconds on a person, maybe 10 seconds, 15 seconds at the bottom of that. It's not worth it, man.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not worth it.
So the end, there's the splits that, like, there are these split sheets that everyone has that says the times about where you're supposed to be to get on certain times. Jonathan made one for me, and bless his heart, he didn't even put like 10 hours on there. No. He just cut off all the top splits.
That's right. I gave you 8 to 9 hours. That was it.
I think 9:30 you gave me too.
Oh yeah. So I did not want you to think of anything else.
And by the way, my goal here is sub 9. If you go sub 9, you get a big belt buckle.
Which Nate's not necessarily into belt buckles. He just wanted to go sub 9.
Automatic re-entry, right?
Yeah, I think
I didn't know about that.
I think you do get something. And let us know if you're watching live right now. Correct us if that's wrong. But I've heard that's the case.
So for the first split, I was at a 2:06. And so for pace, to hit 9 hours, you had to be there at 2 hours. And to hit 9:30, you had to be there at 2:05. So at the first split, I am a minute behind the 9:30. So really, I'm almost on like a 9:40 pace. Yeah.
So
first split.
Can we jump in and kind of share our experience up to this point, maybe? And then we can kind of like go back and forth.
It was actually shaped by something you said later in the race, though. So you were coming back down power line.
Yeah, or Columbine. Yeah.
And said, or maybe it did happen earlier, said I paced too early. I feel like I held back too much.
Paced too easy.
And and it's our theory that that's probably what made the race what it was, up until something that happened later, which we'll get to.
Yeah, so we...
Spoiler alert, Chad.
So one thing...
I'm creating anticipation.
That he is. So as crew members, crewing is very important at this race and more complex than I thought. They have specific routes that are laid out in a guide. However, those routes are not signed whatsoever. And we saw when we were going to, I laid out on GPS or with a GPS app beforehand, and I downloaded the maps and everything else because service is super spotty. But I knew the route to go on the first one.
It's a good thing because there was no indication of where to go.
Zero. None. And people were going just on random roads. We saw people that were definitely supporters just going, and maybe they knew of a spot where they could go to support in a different area.
Perhaps.
Who knows? But it was kind of tricky. And one thing that we learned with this whole thing is that you have to, and well, this is coming up at another point, but we got there pretty early and there were a bunch of people funneling in and pretty panicked to catch the racers on time. Think about it, 2,000 racers, that means there's that many or more supporters in most cases. So it was pretty complex and pretty chaotic to try to get to these aid stations and get into position. And one thing that we worked out with this was, Nate, you wanted us to be as early as possible in the aid station and on your left every time. So that way you kind of knew where to look for us.
We saw people with all sorts of markers. I mean, we saw everything from a stick with a T-shirt tied to the end of it to an actual Subway sub shop flag. So all different sorts of things to help the rider identify quickly where support's coming from.
Because these aid stations are huge.
Oh, yeah. It's like it had to be a quarter mile long.
And the reason why I wanted you guys as early as possible is if I got to the end of the aid station and I would either... I would stop and just ask someone, fill up my bottles, please.
Yeah.
You almost had to do that.
Because then you would assume that we didn't make it.
Yeah,
so you need to do something before you leave it.
Yep.
Also, we kind of separated some duties. So we would, you were very clever in labeling the bottles with the Sharpie per aid station. So we knew which bottles we needed to have. And then you actually put the powder in there already. So then we just had to mix it with, put water in, ice, shake it up. And then give it to him.
And then he ziplocked all his gels and anything else that you wanted along with you. And then we were kind of a well-oiled machine. We had Brandon would do one thing, Jonathan another, and I another. So one of us were clearing pockets, the other one was stuffing pockets. People were pushing bottles in, giving him a hydration pack, swapping helmets, which we'll get to. So we kind of kind of rocked it.
It was
The
pretty
first
good.
the
We're
first
great.
time, Chad, you put the food in the wrong pocket.
I know. I caught that as soon as you left. It's like, oh, wrong pocket.
It was funny because when I told you that you had a few drinks the night before.
Yeah.
One thing too, I had you guys open the honey stinger gels,
Yep.
and I would
The gels or the chews?
The
the chews, yeah, the gels.
Just like a bear with honey.
I kind
I
of
would-
opened that first one a bit much
I would be more specific next time and allow it to open for just one to come out.
because you wanted to squeeze them out. I thought you just wanted them to fall in your pocket. I was just going to dump them in there.
I picked them out and it was in upside down, and all of the chews fell out of my pocket. So I just had an empty
man.
wrapper. I mean, they fell off onto the
man.
ground.
Oh, and
Shoot. Yeah, that'll happen.
So that's another
it's a learning
pro-
process.
Small openings.
small opening, right? And then I had the Cliff Bar blocks later, and those don't even need to be pre-opened because you can just
Pop the
squeeze
bottom,
them.
Yeah,
And
if
you can't drop them all at once, though.
If you don't know that, look at it. You'll see one side, one end is long, where the crimp is, and then one end is short. And the intent behind the short side is that you just push,
Pop
you
it.
squeeze,
Yeah.
boom, and one will pop right
And
out.
we
with
never
those
knew that.
honeys-
The
We
Cliff
never
Bar
knew
guys
it.
had to tell us
So they
that.
told us, and it was like mind blown.
Because
It's
the other side's
amazing.
really hard to open with your teeth.
Totally. And if you try to like split it open like a normal thing, you can never get them out.
Yeah.
pain.
Yeah, you can literally just squeeze while I'm riding, and they just come out.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
So,
Okay, so aid station 1.
Yep, and we did a great change.
We expected you to actually come in around that time because we expected you to be, wise with your pacing and not just cook it in the beginning.
I honestly think I could have gone a little more because of this next section. So we go out. The next section's the kind of flattish. Get in a group of people, trying to work with people. I pulled some, and at least for the flat section, a lot of people didn't want to pull.
Right.
Like so going back to that first climb, when I was climbing at that 230, a lot of people around me were in that second I can never say that word.
Ventilatory threshold.
Threshold, and they're like,
Yeah.
like they couldn't talk,
Yeah.
right? And I was still in the first level, so they were pushing very hard. And then so when you get to the flats, I'm a bigger guy. The pace is not as much work together as you could. And I looked at my power, and my normalized power for that next flat section was it was like 230 for 90 minutes, where I did on that first climb, it was like, I don't know, 18, 20 minutes or something.
Yeah.
And that was 230.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I would rather have pushed harder on the climb and been in a faster group and pushed less time out in the wind.
Yeah. I see
And
what
that
you
probably would have given me an overall faster time.
Yeah. This whole section for us, we needed to go get water. We needed to get a few other things.
Because we left the water on the porch.
Well,
That was
maybe
was
the
a
most
uh-oh.
important thing to do.
You guys didn't bring water.
Yeah. But
You know.
we made it work. We cobbled it together for the first one. Then we hit a gas station
Yeah.
on the way to the second aid station. But that set us back.
It
By the
did.
time we got there, we had to park so far away. We had to be a literal mile, straight mile.
Yeah.
And we had to
I think
run
it was
it
over a mile.
and barely caught it. And
So and we did not think so for crewers that are at this race, they have what they call the pipeline aid station. Then they have the Twin Lakes Dam aid station. That's kind of after the long flat section. Now the Twin Lakes Dam aid station is where the majority of crewers go, we hear. And that's because in many cases a lot of the riders are like, I don't need to have service early on, I just needed that in between point. So, and then they also have something called an alternate aid station, which is 2 miles further down the race course from the Twin Lakes Dam aid station. So we thought we're going to be clever people, and we'll be one of very few to go to this alternate aid station. And we were so
hundred.
wrong. Like it was a massive line of traffic, and we had to park so far away that we had to run at 10,000 feet up. Poor us, we had to.
just a headache the
Sounds
whole
so
time.
hard,
Yeah,
guys.
but we just got there. We didn't have
You
the
ran a mile at 10,000
Yeah, I
feet.
knew this was
Uphill.
coming. But we didn't spend a week there trying to get used to that 1 mile run.
You didn't
Get
carbo load either.
prepared
So
for it.
how could you finish?
And
Did
in
you
my
have crew
mind,
support during that
it's like
mile?
we start walking, and I'm like, I look at my watch, and I'm like, guys, we're gonna miss Nate if he's on any sort of pace. We're gonna miss him. So I was like, we have to run. So we started running, and it did not feel very comfortable. And all I was thinking of in my mind was, if I back it down right now and walk for a bit, and then I
We
miss
will
Nate,
him.
I will tell Nate. I will have to tell him, sorry, Nate, we didn't make it to
I
your
had to
feed
run a
station
mile."
because it was just a little too hard. So I could not do that. And I decided, you know what? No, I'm just going to run all the way up. So Yeah, I turned myself inside out for that one, Nate, to get there in time. So so that was our experience. If you are getting jumping aid stations, man, you really have to hurry.
You have to take it seriously. There's no messing around.
I think pro tip, pre-ride or pre-drive where you have to go.
Exactly right. And it may be tough to know where you need to go unless you've marked the GPS points beforehand. So mark the routes beforehand. Look at the race guide to do that.
Google Maps, you can download map area, which is so helpful because there wasn't a lot of mountain bike races too. There might not be cell reception.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a really good idea to do that. And also, I mean, something else that we saw was a lot of dividing and conquering. There were support crews that said, one person was here, another person was at the other aid station, and right after the start, they just went to that spot. Or a lot of people actually, to get to the first aid station, they went there before the race even started. They already had people there, just that way they could be sure they didn't miss it, because traffic is real. So I guess that's our crewing experience covered there. You came through that aid station, and that's when you told us, you said, I paced too easily.
I know. It wasn't. I think it was on the way back.
Yeah. So you were a little too bummed, or you were.
It wasn't then yet.
Oh, it wasn't then. It was when you came down.
So Twin Lakes, I got in at 2:51, and to do a 9 hours, that's 2:50.
Yep.
So I was still behind the pace, but I had taken out like that flat section. I went very fast, and we talked about gearing. I had 32. Honestly, I think 30 would have been better for me, especially if I would have been in a higher corral, so I could put more power on the climb. But the 32, the one thing it gives you. I've never gotten dropped from a group, but I would bridge up to different groups. So I was
just enough to bridge.
Yeah, and I would bridge hard. I mean, no one else is coming with me. It was almost like a crit where you're like, I see there's a group up there. They're going fast. I need to make a move now to go up to it. And that is one benefit of it.
So you think that if you had a 30, it would have been harder to bridge, but you wouldn't have necessarily been getting dropped out of groups. It just would have been harder to bridge up.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. Okay. So then after that aid station, you started the long climb up to Columbine, where you then turn around and come back. We can't go up there, aid station or a crewer, so you can't do that. So we just waited at the bottom.
That's a straight climb from the 92 or 9600 up to 12,400, 600. I forget what it is.
Tall.
And it's 8% average gradient. That one just fire road, and at the top it gets so loose. And there's so many people. If someone starts walking, you just walk.
Resign yourself to walk.
Pushing your bike is the worst thing ever. My back started to tighten up. Anyway.
Yeah.
I don't need to go play on the climb.
Yeah.
It's a hard climb. You do get off to push. The pros don't. But because you literally can't ride it because there's so many people. And if you could ride it, there's pros coming down the other lane. So there's just one line up. Well, there's two lines, but the pros start coming down the line that you need.
So it gets taken away.
Yep.
Yeah.
So at the top of that, the rule of thumb is you can double your time at the top of Columbine. It's net downhill, but that is your finish time. So this is where I saw it, and I had 4:35 at the top.
Ooh.
So I was like, uh-oh.
Over 9.
That's a 9:10 or 9:12. Yeah. And I talked to everyone around me. I'm like, is this a sub 9? Yeah. They're like, we're going to be close.
Yeah.
And the cue sheet says at the top of Columbine, if you're at a 4:35, you'll hit 9 hours.
Yep.
And I was at 4:35:49.
Yeah.
So 49 seconds off.
So close.
And I know too, descending that thing, it's not technical. It's you need courage because it's, you can hit 40 easy on loose over hard with people all around you.
The pros passing us were pretty.
They were ripping it.
They were ripping because we actually walked up a bit on that one, and we were in the trees, and the first pros were coming down thoroughly. Like it's there's one thing to be said for technical stuff you see on World Cup circuits, but it's an entirely different ordeal and no less scary or dangerous. In fact, I'd say it's much more dangerous to be riding fire roads that are pan flat but really fast like that. It's pretty scary stuff, especially when you have half of that taken away, right? Because of riders coming up the other side.
Yeah.
It's I think that's a section that not enough riders I don't think that section gets enough credit as far as the danger that it has. It's pretty
for the descending,
pretty scary. Yeah.
And we did a helmet swap later, but I actually. So I liked having the aero helmet on that flat section, but I would have done a swap here for the climb because the climb got really hot. And so I'd like to have a more airy helmet on that climb. Wasn't cold at all at the top, still pretty warm. It can get cold, but...
Yeah. So then you dropped. Did the descent go well for you?
Went well enough.
We were very worried about that.
Yeah, this is another thing is I was so tired at this time that my technical ability on this descent was darn right dangerous.
Yeah. Really?
I had my dropper post dropped all the way. I was sitting on my dropper post. I had my left leg down on the way, and then I just tried to bend over as much as I could, but my back was locking up. My triceps were sore. My back and my neck was sore. And the bike wasn't weighted properly.
Yeah, it's a good point, right?
Yeah, we did talk about
Has your back ever locked up on a long ride, Chad?
Oh, yeah.
Is it because you didn't hit the gym enough?
Probably not.
Yeah.
Man, good job, Nate. You just put Chad in his place there.
What I thought that was a little weird is the pushing the bike uphill, and I twisted my body. That kind of got my lower back more than it would normally in a different situation.
Yeah.
But to Chad's point, after the race, triceps, entire back, and neck were sore. I probably could have had stronger triceps, entire back, and neck.
Totally.
And that would have helped.
Sure. I mean, if you look, I was looking at some of like the top riders and looking at their, because we took photos of them coming down, and I was looking at their body position in relation to their strength, those two specific things. And when you look at apparent strength, I can't tell, how, but apparent strength, and you look at the riders that are relatively strong, like Albin Licata, the world champ, that sort of thing, compared to some of the other racers that didn't have that strength, you saw a total difference in their posture and control, like a total difference. They were postured up, and it didn't look like it was costly for them, versus some riders, you saw them like folded down in half, and it looked like they were just in, absolute agony.
Yeah, but I mean, in support of weight training, we're all going to reach that point if we're going to ride for 9 straight hours. But where you reach it along that continuum, does it happen at 4 hours in? Does it happen at 8 hours in? I mean, the stronger you are, the better you ride your bike, the longer you postpone that breakdown.
Yeah, this race will break you.
I felt fine until I was pushing my bike. That is the thing that was horrible. So, and two, Howard Grotz coming down.
Yeah.
I've never seen someone. His chin was about an inch above his stem, like his handlebars, and that's like very low, like attack position. It's amazing.
Super important on a descent like this, right? You don't have technical things that are going like a rocks or anything else like that at the lower portion. Instead, all you have to really worry about is front end traction. That's it, and your line choice. So in that case, you should be putting as much weight as you can toward that front wheel. You don't do that by moving your hips forward. You do that by getting your shoulders low.
Yeah.
So
the next aid station, we get there. That's when I said, I think I paced too slow, because at the top, I was on that 9-hour thing, and I was like, oh, shoot.
Yeah.
But when I don't know why I did this, because I didn't descend fast, but I got to that aid station at 5:11:47.
Yeah.
And a 5:15 would put me at 9. So somehow I got ahead.
Yeah.
From the descent, which does not seem right for me, because people passed me on the descent too. I didn't descend fast, but there was a little bit of riding after that, and after the descent, and I saw that, I was like, okay, it's time to start putting out power, because
that's probably where people start their breakdown.
It may very well have been, because by the time we got to Twin Lakes Dam, you had already gone through the aid station with us at that point, the alternate aid station. And we had that help of those awesome families. They were crewing these two families.
The 4 Qs.
The 4 Qs, yeah. They were training. So the TrainerRoad users, the husbands were, and the whole family was out there to support them.
The wives were TrainerRoad users too.
Yeah, absolutely. And they were kind enough to let us kind of like use their tent to help.
That's awesome.
They had one kid doing glasses. They had one kid picking up the wheel, another kid spinning the wheel, and then another kid putting lube on the chain.
Yeah, so we felt fancy until we saw that.
Yeah, we're like,
oh yeah, we're rookies.
Yeah, they asked me to clean my glasses, and you're in a weird state. And I looked up, and I'm like, you look so familiar, but how do I know you?
Yeah. They were awesome, but you got a great stop at that point. And I saw a lot of people just charging through that alternate aid station, because they didn't have people there. But when you stopped there, you had that fresh refuel and everything else. That may very well have really been a relative gain compared to what most people do. Because remember, these splits are based off of they've looked at what people have done.
Yeah.
So, having something at the alternate aid station could have given you the juice, so to speak, that you needed.
And I didn't stop at the top Columbine, because I think stopping at that elevation is not smart.
Oh, yeah.
Just go down.
I don't know what you'd gain from that. Yeah.
And two, the splits I'm using are the splits of the electronic timing on the course, not the alternative aid station, because that would make sense, because alternative aid station is a few miles ahead of the real aid station.
Yep. Yeah, we just gave you go juice. You were ready to go.
So I'm pretty at this point, I'm pretty like, oh shoot, I messed this hole up.
Yeah.
It pays too bad. I should have qualified at a higher corral.
9:10 or something.
Time to put out the power. So I start going. I meet somebody else who's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
And we're working together, and we're actually getting up to more groups and moving forward.
Nice.
And I'm getting in groups. That's awesome. Feeling really good.
Yeah.
And we get to the pipeline aid station, and I get there at 6:05.
Yeah.
And 6:05:59, so it's called 6:06. And at that one, at aid station, I'd have to be at a 6:20 for a 9-hour pace.
Yeah.
So I'm like 15 minutes under that 9 now.
And
so,
this is where we start to see it's not just that you went absolutely full gas out of your mind, but I think that this is where we start to see the conservative pacing, good nutrition, good hydration paying off compared to what average people do.
my normalized power in that section was only like 210.
Wow.
And before on the way out, it was like 230. So I was actually putting out less power, but relative to other people, like you said, who don't eat as much or drink as much.
Or they don't pace as well.
It pace as well, right?
Yeah.
It's so much more fun. You can look at my splits. I pass people the entire race.
Yeah.
To start out slow, to feel good, and to pass people.
Yeah.
Then to go hard, get past, and blow up.
Totally.
So, I mean, more people should do it. And looking at my power output for the race, I still put out significantly less power for the second half than the first half.
Yeah.
So I might have even went too hard the first half,
Right.
even with my passing most people.
It's kind of crazy
Yeah.
looking at it that way. And we saw plenty of people going through that first aid station. We were kind of shocked. We were like, they look like they've had a really hard day already.
Pretty hard, yeah.
Yeah, you know, like on that first climb, they were like so breathing hard.
Yeah. And then when you came through, I was so relieved to see how fresh and ready you were at that first aid
You
station.
looked good every time we saw you.
Yeah.
This is when I started putting the
Till the end.
caffeine.
And
And
can we cover that? You had an ambitious caffeine plan.
well, I was going to do 800. I had caffeine in my food, and I was going to do 800 milligrams of caffeine through like no-dose tablets.
Yeah.
Doing these little foil packets. Take them out. I'm like, this is the time.
Yeah.
800 all at once, right then?
Yeah.
Jeez.
You think that those
that's pretty rough, man.
spread out over 9 hours is not.
Yeah.
It's not that much.
Totally.
Oh, yeah.
If you were to spread it out.
Mhm.
But I probably had, a whole 400 from the other stuff. The first 2 tablets, I missed my mouth. I don't know how I did it. I was like a little kid.
Just missed them.
Yeah, so I only could
Oh,
put in
man.
400 milligrams.
Well, that's it right there. I mean, you would have been probably sub 7 if you would have had the caffeine, right?
I know.
Just think of it, right?
So we get to the final. That's the final one.
Mm-hmm.
We switch. Just to tell you that I started out with a hydration pack with Martan. I did 2 360s, whatever, 320s,
Yeah.
320s
Uh-huh.
in there. That was the right choice to start out with. That was a last minute switch because it's so hectic.
Yeah.
Really glad I did that. It's cold. Then I switched to all bottles. When we went to that aid station, I went back to hydration pack with the bottle because it's so long until we get to the end.
And we can't visit you at this point. Like our last aid station, that's it. We had to
Yeah.
go back to the
Yeah.
finish.
Could
Yep.
we have put somebody up the climb, though?
I
March somebody
think
in?
so.
Not the pipeline, but later on there's a road and there's people parked all along it.
Yeah. Even though it says in the guidebook that you can't provide aid at other spots other than that's indicated, it happens.
There's
And
a lot of people.
I honestly
And it's
think
safe
that
too. They just sit there.
I think that it would be smart of the race to actually kind of recommend support for that because it was like a different race in a lot of ways, seeing people at the last aid station versus the finish.
Yeah.
I mean, some people were they looked like they'd been through war in that last section. So I think it'd be a smart idea.
And there was a common theme amongst the people who fell apart on that last climb. They ran out of water. It was hot,
Yep.
and there was no water.
Yeah.
So we switch to the lighter helmet, and this is where things start to fall apart. Going up that power line climb, I started to drink that Martan, and it's not cold. It's like warm.
Yeah, we packed
hot.
it with ice too,
And
so
we-
it was pretty warm by that point in the day.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The sun is just so intense there. It's a black little Camelback. It's insulated, but even then, I'm not sure if it was another color. I'm sure that it would have still gotten super because the sun was intense. It was hot.
Well, my Garmin, the temperature, the low was 28. The high that my Garmin said was 102. Like I don't know how it read that high because
Yeah.
it wasn't 102
No,
air
I
temperature,
think
but
it was mid to high 70s though, and when you're at 11,000 feet, that feels hot.
It felt very hot, yeah.
so I'm on the climb, and to the skin suit I have these plastic pockets on it, which I need to get replaced, and we have the black, TrainerRoad
Yeah.
black.
There's little heat sinks.
It's the pockets. I can't tell you guys how hot it was, and you can see pictures of me. I always had my
Jersey
unzipped.
Yeah.
I was getting so hot. So I was carrying that hydration pack up all of Powerline, and I couldn't drink it because Martan too, when it's cold and it's early in the day and it's cold outside, that's easy. But when it's warm, it tastes like you blended Cheerios, and it's kind of like
It's
thick.
too calorically dense for that point in that race.
Yeah, when it gets hot, it's a different ordeal, man.
Yeah.
So that scratch ball you guys gave me was gone.
Just
And
you down
So
that.
we basically
instant.
just gave you a weight pack.
Yep. And I carried it the whole time. I didn't want to litter.
Yeah, heated weight pack.
Nice job, Chad.
You're welcome.
We did great. Yeah.
So that was very hard.
Yeah.
And when I I think in that section I got passed by like 7 people or something.
You started to overheat.
Mm-hmm.
That was really hot. And I just you need to get in that situation where you just start concentrating. You're like, I need water. I need water. I need water. And then I went to the top and I'm like, do you have any water? He's like, I got pickle juice. I'm like, no. Then you also get into a situation where you get overly hot that you don't want to eat anything too.
Yeah.
Which is not good.
It's the beginning of the end.
That's a downward spiral right there. And it's not just you guys have some pretty hard climbs. I mean, pipeline's extremely hard. Even in a vacuum, pipeline's hard.
Yeah.
With this race, it's a different ordeal altogether. But it's not just pipeline, right? You guys have like a road climb. I heard that was pretty tough. Mixed in there in the end.
It's just a slow drag up to the end, isn't it?
It's not a tough climb. It's just where it is. It's not like it's like 6% or something. So
but it's just brutal because of where it is in the race.
And it's in the sun.
Yeah.
And I kept asking people on the side of the road, do you have any water? Do you have any water? Nope. We got ice towels. Okay, I'll take that.
Yeah.
I gave my hydration pack to somebody, just like this guy. Like, do you have any water?
He scored.
I know it was like 6 or 7 pounds.
Yeah.
There you go, because I don't want to climb it up the top. And I'm looking at my pace, and I thought I was still like right on line for 9.
Yeah.
Get to the final aid station at the top of the climb,
which we can't go to. That's like a
neutral aid station.
Water only.
Yep. Ask for water. Their water's not cold. My God. Please get races. Cold water at aid stations.
Yeah. It's relatively easy, guys.
It was like you could tell at one time it was cold, probably in the morning.
Yeah.
It was like lukewarm, not hot.
Yeah.
And then at that time it was about an hour. It was like 8 hours in, and the guy's like, "You might be able to make 9, but I've seen it, but maybe not." So I go as hard as I can. I start to totally fall apart. I remember on one climb, I was like, okay, this is a sustainable pace. I look down, it's 89 watts.
89.
Oh my gosh.
I did on this other section right before the end. There's this more climbing at the end. And I think for 2.5 minutes, I did like 200 watts. And that was a all out effort for me. And at this time, I can't do the math in my head. I don't have speed. I know I have the distance. So I have like 2 miles and I have like 10 minutes to go 2 miles. And I'm like, wait, or something. I can't even think of what I can make.
Yeah. Doing crazy math in a foggy state is never a good thing to do.
Yep.
We were at that finish line for 2.5 hours, I think, maybe a little more. We were there for quite some time waiting for you to come in because when you left that last aid station where we were, you were chipper, you were excited, you were like giving us thumbs up, like you were ready to go. Yeah. You were dropping down your time constantly. We just gave you what we thought was a fantastic feed. So we were like, man, Nate's going to come in. That we may be talking about how close is he going to get to 8 instead of 9.
I had you picked for an 8:22.
Yeah.
I was on pace for more like an 8:30 with those changes. And I think if that hydration pack, if we would have done almost like had it half frozen.
Yeah.
With all water.
Yeah.
And then a bottle or maybe even 2 bottles because of how long it is and how hot the day was.
Yeah.
That would have kind of changed the rest of the race.
Yeah,
because I still, before coming into there, I still felt like strong until I got dehydrated.
We should have done that. Jeff Kabush told us that he did that very thing on this podcast when we talked about Dirty Kansas, right? Like he said that he froze his bladders the night before because he knew that a lot of those would be traveling to aid stations and he didn't want to run the risk of it, showing up and being in the sun all day. So he at least wanted to make it frozen.
Well, we had a nice cooler. We should have loaded with ice, like if you could somehow track me like right before or kept it in the cooler with the ice.
The whole pack.
Keep the whole pack cold.
It's awesome. That really helps.
Tips there.
Yep.
Anyways, I finished at 8:50.24, which was nice. So I got it by 10 minutes.
Then you proceeded to fall over and be in a bad way.
I was in a very bad way. I don't think I had a heat stroke, but heat exhaustion.
Yes.
Then I started you were shivering at some point.
Yeah. Then I went over, started to shiver on the ground. Yeah.
You were kind
shaky.
of like your wrists and ankles were kind of like curling in, like you were like.
Yeah, that's thermoregulatory failure right there. You're
it was
falling
pretty
apart.
bad, man.
I was laying on the grass and I was shivering, and I just remembered I was like, oh, I just want to sleep, and I was like falling asleep, and I said, nope, I don't want to fall asleep.
Yeah, do not do that.
So I went to the aid station,
scary,
or the medical tent. I was hoping for an IV. Ironman races, they didn't have any IV stuff. I got a Coke, kind of in the shade. That helped. I drank a whole bunch of water.
Yeah.
And I drank water forever, and I didn't pee until like 6-7 hours later, and that was still dark. So I was very dehydrated. Yeah. Side note, I'd love it if we could go to some kind of place where we could do sweat analysis.
Yeah.
Because I think I'm a heavy sweater while I ride.
Yep.
You're definitely a heavy sweater, and we can see what your sodium loss is too.
Exactly. So if anyone has an in on that,
or
a university we could go to, please email submit to the podcast.
Yeah, you can estimate it. I think Precision Hydration gives you some tips on how to estimate it that are pretty.
But wouldn't it be fun?
Measured.
Sure. Yeah, why not? Yeah,
let's get it
for us.
measured.
Yeah, but for people in general.
Yeah, good call.
So overall, I had 3.5 minutes of stops for all the aid stations. My normalized power was 212. My average power was 163, and my kilojoules were 5,179.
Gotcha. Wow, that's a big day. Yeah, that's a lot.
The I think my normalized power before I had problems was more like 225, 230.
Gotcha.
So that final part, it really dropped.
Yeah.
Oh no, here it goes. The first half was 226. The second half normalized power was 192.
Yeah, you tanked. It's like 30%. That's more.
Yeah.
Big drop.
For those that didn't listen to the previous podcast, you usually see a reduction of around 83% of your threshold when you are at elevation, 10,000 feet of elevation we're talking about. So in this case, with you dropping down from where did you think your FTP was beforehand here?
330 here.
Yeah.
So if you do all the math, that puts me at 300 there.
Yep.
Which I think is probably pretty accurate, and that means I wrote it at a 0.7 IF.
Right.
Which is reasonable, right, Chad?
It's about where you'd expect,
It's a good goal.
Yep. Yeah, it's absolutely.
The biggest thing, and this blew some minds I talked to, I didn't do any long training rides. Like I talked to some people, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm doing Saturday and Sunday 6-hour rides, like 100-mile road rides to try to prepare for this thing."
Yeah.
I did some longer races. Longest race was 5.5 or maybe 6, but that was way back in the spring. I think I did 3 long races, maybe 4 long races, but still nothing close to
and stretched
long,
out,
meaning half the time.
Yeah.
Stretched out, indoor rides, longest 2 hours. Like you don't need to go.
Yeah, you don't need to do
these. I think it's actually worse for you because you're not recovering after these long things, and you can't build up as much.
Take a heavy toll,
Yeah, it can be really tricky. Granted, there's something to be said for learning, your equipment, and one thing that I could argue if you had done longer stuff is you might have been made more aware of the tricep weakness, or you know what I mean, like the fact that you needed more strength or stability on the bike, right? But in terms of the fitness to get through the event and also to do darn well at the event, man, you can get away with a whole lot.
We're very proud of our Nathan. That's a sub 9 in his first go at it.
Yeah, it's pretty. That was a seriously. So the explosion. The heat explosion, I guess we could say, included, that was impressive. But even aside from, if you had gone through without that, I think that you probably would have been sub 830. That would have been seriously impressive.
We'll never know.
For the person that wasn't a mountain biker 2 years ago.
Yep.
Like,
but this is timed by chip, right? So we saw a couple of people come through at like 9:01 or just after 9, banging their bars, thinking, "Oh, I just missed it," when in fact they didn't roll across the start line for a couple minutes. So. Yeah. That's how they paint it or portray it, but that's not exactly what happened. So some of these people who think they didn't make the 9-hour cutoff actually did. So they did make the big buckle.
Maybe someone can answer is the belt buckle on the clock time or your chip time?
It's got to be chip time.
It's got to be, right?
Yeah. Yep, almost positive it is. So, I remember the announcers on one guy that came in. It was either just after 8 or it was just after 8:30, something like that. And he was like, "You just missed it." And the rider was banging his bars. And then I was like, "Wait a second."
No, he was
probably is okay.
You talking about the 9:01 guy?
Yeah. Poor guy, man. That was rough. So,
in the moment, but then.
It was great. Some personal bits really quick. It's awesome for us to meet so many of you, a ton of you. I was there waiting for Nate because I had no clue when Nate would come across the finish line. So I got to, personally see and thank a whole lot of you guys and congratulate you on your performances right at the finish line. That was a really cool experience for us because, we're an internet software company, right? So we don't get to, and hopefully it's portrayed a bit through this podcast, but we genuinely care. And we want to help people. That's the motive behind
Always
this.
come talk to us. Never. I saw so many people look at me and smile and wave, but not come chat with me as though maybe I don't have time to.
Maybe they don't want to talk to you, Chad.
Maybe
they're looking for Jonathan and I.
That's funny. But the thing about it is, it was so cool to be able to actually show, to put a cold towel on your neck on the finish line, to give you a bottle, to help you at aid stations. We help some folks at aid stations, that sort of thing. It's cool to do that because genuinely that's how we feel. We want to be doing that at all times, to be helping you guys. So it's really cool to be able to do it in person. That was just, it was super cool. It was fun to meet everybody and go through all of that. So a couple of things from people sending in stuff live.
Yeah.
Somebody verifies that it is indeed chip time, so that's good to hear.
Makes sense.
Another person was asking that, and perhaps you joined perhaps a little late, but they're thinking about the carb loading. They're worried because they say they're obese, and they, stuffing their face full of food, as they say,
it's a short-term fix.
Seems to help. But yeah, that's just it, right? Like, you don't have to worry about it's not like you taking care of this for 2 days prior to the event is going to set you back massively in terms of weight goals.
I feel that way though.
But you did feel like you gained weight, right?
Well, so during it you do actually gain weight because you're packing on more glycogen and you're drinking a lot more water, so you are physically gaining weight. And as your muscles get bigger, it pushes out the fat a little bit too, and you just feel a little squishier. But when I got back in town and got on the scale, I think I actually was like a pound lighter than when I had left for Leadville. But it didn't like I came back and I gained 5 pounds. Yeah. This morning I was 185. Just right around the same.
It's a short-term solution. It's not going to affect anything long-term.
Yeah. Don't do it for every ride.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No.
That would be bad.
And we have a few folks that are questioning or saying that carb loading is nonsense, and there's a lot of science to prove that it's not just avoiding a bonk, but having more glycogen on board within reason actually helps performance.
Lowers RPE.
It's not nonsense.
Yep. Yeah, so there's actually science behind. Now, don't get me wrong, if you're just, shoveling down a bunch of pasta and that's it, that's one thing, but you get this from higher quality foods. You get it from sweet potatoes, you get it from vegetables.
I'm not going to next time.
Fill it up. Right.
Cereal.
Yeah,
just cereal.
You're going to try and see how it works.
It's cuz it's so hard.
So, it's not nonsense. It's absolutely helps. There's science to back that up. So, yeah, and there's plenty of diets, always a kind of a touchy subject there, but let's see. People are also asking on what's the ideal amount of caffeine to have for a race like this.
3 grams per kilogram of body weight. So the science supports that you don't need much more than that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do the math and you figure out what that is, so what would that be for an 85 kg rider? About 250 milligrams.
Yeah, right around there.
Yeah.
For how often though? For 9 hours or for 1 hour?
Well, yeah,
there's a big difference.
No, that's a different context. So we're talking about preloading for a race. 30 minutes prior, it'd be something along that order, and then they've measured anything beyond that doesn't really have an additive benefit.
See, I read the opposite. Is it you have to have at least 300 milligrams to have a benefit, and then it goes all the way up to that. What is it? The 10 or the 8 or to the 10?
Which
Seriously?
I assume would have to
for caffeine.
For caffeine,
I'll
double check that.
Yeah.
I'll double check that, and let's come back next week and
we'll talk about that because I would assume that somebody that doesn't consume caffeine very much would see a massive boost.
Well, and then there's also how you respond to caffeine intake.
Exactly.
Some people do, some people don't. Some people are very sensitive to it.
I think one tip is don't go to 800 from zero. Like try that 200 first, or the 150, and then go from there.
It's like anything else.
Yep, absolutely. All right. So I guess that covers the Leadville side of things. Is there anything else that we want to cover with this one?
One other thing is I just feel so trashed. Like afterwards, it's a good segue about what we're going to do next. But
yeah.
The whole week just drained. I still don't feel like doing anything. I don't want to be at work. I just want to go home.
I was pretty tired, and all I did was hang out. So I mean, just the travel and being at high altitude and in the heat and
wears you
the
out.
Stress.
There and for folks that are crewing, it's a lot of work, man.
Oh, it's a job.
It's like
there was not.
I work so hard. I don't know why Nate's complaining. We work really hard.
Is this like when we go to Kona and we watch everybody?
Yeah, exactly. It's so hard to watch Kona. Yeah.
The other takeaway: 4 watts per kilo, doable for sub 9. I probably lost 15 minutes on descents just because I'm cautious. If you're a good descender. Yeah. And then also the blow up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this goes for all long races. Pace well.
Mm-hmm.
So many people pace bad, poorly.
Yeah, totally. I saw tons of that.
Yeah.
And drink. I need to drink water, and I could have done it better. I think later on in the race too, you just want more water to drink, and I would have had more of the SIS gels, which I really enjoyed during this race.
Yeah, those things are great to choke down. Pretty easy to do. One last thing before we just leave off of Leadville. Fantastic job to everybody out there. That was pretty cool to watch. Impressive stuff to see how deep all of you had to push to get to that finish line. Pretty cool to see some dads crossing and moms crossing the line with their kids, running alongside of them. Pretty inspiring stuff. So good job to everybody that did that. That brings us to what we're going to do next. One other thing. we saw a situation in an aid station when somebody was handing off.
So we flirted with the idea of Nate using a Mizette bag. So we were gonna load his stuff in a bag, and then we figured we'd just hand him that, and he could, pick the stuff, pluck the stuff out, stuff it in his pockets, and ditch the bag, sort of thing. But then we reasons probably not a good idea to introduce something new to the game the day of.
Yeah, especially something like that that's kind of complex.
So, coincidentally, we see that very thing take place. A wife or a significant other hands the bag to her husband, hooks his handlebars. Bars go one way. He went over the bars, went down so quick and hard, there was nothing he could have done to save it. She feels terrible. He's at the first aid station and now has to ride the rest of the race with that. He hit hard. There's no way that didn't hurt and didn't impact the rest of his race. And had they practiced, maybe they could have avoided that. Maybe they haven't done it with a mountain bike, because those big old long bars and the bag straps, it's a recipe for disaster.
When you see at the tour, I'm thinking about it now.
Happens there with the best riders in the world.
And they have their arms up as high as possible.
Yes.
And they're not like dangling it, but it's like this huge reach up into the sky, and that makes sense. And then the riders reach up in the sky and take it, rather than holding it out at like where you would normally hold it out at maybe shoulder level.
Yes, yeah, it's pretty dangerous
stuff.
Just
a small slip, and we all felt so bad for both the rider and his wife, because that just ruined her day.
Yeah.
It did.
Oh, it was pretty rough.
But he took off. He sprung right back up and started riding. So here's hoping he had a good race.
I was impressed with him. Yeah, for sure. So now that Leadville's done, the question has already come into the Facebook podcast group. What's next? What next are we planning on?
Short races.
Short. Yeah, exactly. Next year, short races. Although we're gonna blow that out of the water with one. But in the short term, Nate, you've taken a week off of training.
Yep.
And then you got surgery next week.
I got surgery next week to hopefully try to fix my constant sinus infections that I get. I went back to ENT. I've already had one surgery. She did a scan and she points at something and says, "Yep, that's the reason. That's creating a pool." And I believe it's actually turbinate reduction, but they're gonna rotor my nose to try to reduce something so that it will drain, because she thinks I have a pool. So when I get sick, a pool happens and an infection goes.
Gotcha.
So.
Yeah. So you're going to have that. And then fast forward a long way forward. We're going to do some, Nate, you're going to do some cross racing.
Yep.
I'm going to do a few if the knee's okay. Chad, you?
Probably, yeah. Cross sounds fun.
Yeah.
And then at Hawaii in October, maybe Mauna Kea. That's a big one.
Yeah, I'm not doing that.
That's its own Leadville.
Give it another crack.
I'm going to rent a scooter. I'm going to get one of those vests that
no scooters.
We're doing the scooter. And then I'm going to get a vest that has like the bottles like you see in the Pro Tour.
Yeah.
And I'm going to wear that thing, and you guys will just be able to grab bottles right off of me.
Where's the ice going to go, though?
I need to ride down.
Pack on the scooter, maybe? Ice.
Oh, yeah, we'll have a little cooler strapped onto it's going to be perfect.
When we get to the
on
top.
motor pace, you guys, it'll be great. Guyman had a 30-mile-an-hour tailwind. We got to do something. So
when we get to the top of Mauna Kea, I want to ride down.
Yeah.
With my bike on your scooter.
That sounds like a great idea.
Yeah. And Chad
Nothing will go wrong there at all, I'm sure. Yeah.
We'll make it work.
I'm on the fence right now if I want to do Mauna Kea or not, but
yeah, # too soon after Leadville, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
you can't.
Yeah, don't even want to think of that.
Not in the proper frame of mind to consider something like that.
Yep.
And the next big one, Jonathan?
24 hours in Old Pueblo.
Yeah, what's that?
So that is a 24. We said we're going to do short stuff. This is a 24-hour endurance mountain bike team relay. You can do it solo too, but it's a team relay, and it happens in the city of Old Pueblo, which is a fictional city. It actually does. It's just a pop-up city that Epic Rides makes out in the desert by somewhere in between Phoenix and Tucson, I think. So we're going to go do that one. We've heard it's a ton of fun.
What elevation is it at?
I think that it's somewhere around 2,000.
Fantastic.
Feet.
Yeah, 2,000 feet. Yeah,
not
we
meters.
Should clarify. I think 2,000 to 3,000 probably, somewhere around there. Yeah,
Perfect.
I'm not entirely sure, but I'm sure somebody can chime in right now and let us know the average elevation around that spot.
Either way, it's not a high altitude.
No, it's not.
Elevation.
So we're gonna go do that. We are planning on it's going to be us three plus a fourth team member. We haven't decided who that fourth team member is yet, or we haven't gotten a confirmation. We've decided. That person hasn't confirmed. So we'll see how that goes. If you're doing that race, let us know. It's going to be a ton of fun.
And this is contingent on us getting a motorhome to rent.
Yeah,
because I'm not doing it in a tent.
Yeah, no way.
We'll go next year.
Yeah, so we need to find a motorhome that we can rent for that one. So that'll be good times. But yeah, so that's the plan, and that's going to be in January, I believe.
And so everyone, just real quick, it's 1 hour laps pretty much,
yep.
And then you rotate off.
Yep.
And you can do it's how
you can
far
do 2 or 3 laps too.
Yeah, exactly. So a team could sleep, and we'll go into all the tactics later about what we're going to do. And I think it's whoever they go the farthest, right?
Yeah.
Whatever team goes the farthest.
Yep, that's
so
it.
It's just 24 hours of racing. That's it.
Whichever
so
team has logged more laps.
Or do you stop the?
No, I think that they basically you might be able to go out by the time cutoff. I'm not exactly sure, but usually with these races, it's basically like by the time cutoff, you have to be on a current lap at that point, and then you can.
We'll get clear on all these details, of course.
And then when is it? February?
I believe it's in January, but it may be February.
Dude, that's when I peak.
That's it.
This is awesome.
Nate always naturally
February
peaks
superstar.
right there. Yep.
No, but
right up your alley, buddy.
Yeah. To set the stage right now.
Yeah.
We want to go fast, right?
Oh, for
Let's
sure.
be I don't want to I'm not doing this for fun. I want to compete.
Yeah,
to win it.
for sure.
And that's what some people are like. I mean, I appreciate the comments of people for Leadville is like, don't try to go for a pace, just enjoy it. Yeah. I don't enjoy a 9-hour ride.
How does anybody enjoy a 9-hour ride?
I want to go for the feeling of self-accomplishment.
Got it.
If I don't try hard, I'm kind of like,
no, we're gonna.
I don't feel accomplished if I don't try hard.
We'll be all in on this one. I should be finishing up a very long base phase at that point, so I should be going pretty well.
You're a ringer. You better be.
Oh yeah. There's very minimal technicality, relatively speaking, compared to
it's kind of flat.
Normal mountain bike or cross country races you would do. It's got one section where it's got like a heckler's rock, sort of a drop thing at the end, but it's really not too tough.
We just need to bring big watts.
Yeah, big watts, and make sure you don't go off course because cacti are about. So that's basically it.
Big watts and avoid the cacti.
Yep. Yeah. So that's the next one. We're going to be targeting thereafter short races throughout the year, just doing crits, cross country races. 90
minutes or under, preferably an hour or under.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
I love that.
Then my target next year is national championships. So I'm not going to be competitive for a title, I don't think, next year. But the plan is to get recon on the course so that if they double up like they have been in the past on doing nationals in the same spot for 2 years, then I can have some beta and some experience and have a long 2-year build into what will, I hope, be a championship winning season in 2020. So
that is so exciting.
Yeah,
I want that to be the new storyline. We just got to get if your knee is better, you can do it.
Yes.
To give people context, you've gotten fifth at nationals before?
Yeah, fourth.
Fourth?
Yeah.
And I think you are a smarter, faster, better descender athlete now.
Yeah.
And I like this idea of going pretty much 2 years to do it.
Yeah. I need to give myself some time to get in some really good builds to be at that level, to be competitive. So I'm looking forward to that.
Exciting.
And next week, we're actually going to be doing a special episode because you'll be out, Nate. Chad and I will have TrainerRoad employee, Cliff Bar crit beast, Pete Morris. He'll be joining us.
Pete the Doughboy Morris. We're guessing.
Not very nice.
I'm not saying he's a doughboy. I'm saying he's been on vacation for 6 weeks.
Well,
he's been on his honeymoon.
He got married.
Yes.
Yep. And he's been on
his honeymoon in Africa. So we'll see. He could have he could be drinking bad water and eating bad food and come back super thin. He could just be eating great food and come back a little bigger. We'll see. But anyways, we're going to next week. We're actually going to sit down with an elite level athlete like this, and we're going to say, okay, Pete, he's going to have done a ramp test, and we'll say, where are you at? Where do you need to be? What are your goals? And we're basically going to walk you through how we would lay out a whole season, so of racing and training, that sort of stuff. So then you can kind of use that as a template to do the same thing, because it's about that time where people are going to, or already are, planning out their next year. So we'll go through that next week with Pete. It's going to be a ton of fun, so you can tune into that one. Yep. Time for a few questions. Let's get them in. This one's from Ryan, and he says, I recently got an altitude machine that goes up to 10,000 feet. It has a mask to use while training, and I'm not sure the best kind of workouts to use this with. I know living high and training low is ideal, but clearly not an option for me since I live in Oklahoma. He says, I'm going to be doing cyclocross this year, though this could be a good way to get ready for this sort of intensity of cyclocross. I have 10 plus years in triathlon, and the intensity is new for me, and it kills me. Any thoughts on workouts with altitude training devices would be great. So one thing before we go into this too deep, altitude training or altitude machine, there are a few different things. Yeah. So you can get the Bane mask that you see that CrossFitters loving to use, right? Where they put on the mask and it restricts your breathing. That's
which I think is what he's talking about.
It might be.
So he's also got a machine and it comes with a mask. So let's just address the mask.
So and there are a number of different things. I'm going to run through the equipment first that it could be. So it could be that. It could be a machine that actually you put on and does actually deprive you of oxygen. So it's basically a little block, and then you put the mask on that's connected to that, and then it can actually, what it does is it doesn't deprive you of air as much as what it does is it decreases the density, right? Just like you have it at higher elevation. So, and then there's the other machines that can do the opposite of that. They can give you more oxygen. So we don't have a lot of information on exactly what this is.
So let's assume it's one of the,
We can assume different cases and run through them, see what it is. So like the Bane mask. Let's cover that thing first.
The Bane mask, which is more of an inspiratory training device. So actually training the muscles that help you inhale air.
Yes.
Okay, before we get to that, let's just talk a little bit of physiology. Mm-hmm. So there's something called the oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve. So if you think of, excuse me, you breathe in oxygen, it attaches to your blood via hemoglobin, and that carts it off to the muscles so that you can do work. There's something called, so that ties to oxygen affinity. How readily does oxygen grab, or blood, hemoglobin specifically, grab oxygen out of your lungs and then transport it to the muscles? So there's an affinity, a relationship there. How hard does it hold on to it? How readily does it release it? Something called the Bohr effect, where your oxygen affinity, how strongly your blood clings to your oxygen, is inversely related to your blood acidity and carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide, the harder we work, the more carbon dioxide we put out. The more acidic our blood gets, the more readily it relinquishes oxygen at the muscle, the more work we can do. Okay, this kind of happens at elevation as you acclimatize, or if you simulate elevation and you acclimate. And that's basically, I think that's what these masks are chasing. But the problem falls with if all we're doing is limiting, like in the case of the inspiratory training devices, limiting air intake. We're not changing the concentration of the air or the oxygen content. We're simply making you breathe harder, which means less oxygen is making it to the muscle, which means we're not really deriving that stimulus that we're looking for that brings about the adaptation we're chasing. So it's kind of a poor way of going about it, assuming that's the device we're talking about.
Yeah, and a lot of people say, well, if it's helping strengthen the breathing muscles, isn't that helping me?
Yeah, but so much of the air we breathe in, I mean, it doesn't matter. We're still dumping a ton of oxygen. We only utilize a small percentage of that oxygen for the work we do. The rest of it comes right back out.
For instance, I used to play tuba. I was actually a music major. Tuba was my constant instrument. Boy, I had a big intake of
tidal volume,
just the whole time. And I swam in high school at the same time. That didn't make me an outstanding athlete at all. Just being able to have a whole bunch of air intake.
Right.
Too, you'd probably see all the pros play tuba because all you do is just breathe in as much as you can and then out as much as you can.
In one respect, that the logic behind that is similar in one respect to thinking that you can make your car faster by putting on a bigger gas tank. It doesn't make it faster, right? Yeah. Like you still got the system that it needs to follow through. And the capacities of the engine are what the capacities of the engine are. And in our case, it's cool because we can train
that. It's the engine's ability to utilize the fuel that we're funneling to it. And if all we're doing, and in this case, is really diluting that fuel, pouring water into our gasoline, it's not going to make you a faster athlete.
Yeah. In fact, that usually is very bad for engines. So, it's kind of interesting. Now, a lot of people look at these machines where and I've read different studies. I think that I've seen some stuff that Chris Carmichael has done at Colorado Springs at the training facility they have for USA Cycling, where they've basically looked at how putting an athlete in a situation where there is lower concentration of oxygen. Sure. And they say that it takes, you can't just do that for, workouts for a short amount of time.
Well, see, that's the live high, train low modality. That exactly. Yep. And in that it has to take place over a long time course. Yes. And we're talking at a particular altitude simulation or elevation simulation too. Yeah. So they've discovered, or there's plenty of some science to support that it happens between 2,000 and 2,500 meters. So we're talking like 6,600 to about 8,300 feet. So a very specific range where it happens. That's the sweet spot. Above it, there's actually been noted some detrimental effects. Below it, it's not a strong enough stimulus to incur the physiological adaptation we're chasing, which is more red blood cells, higher hematocrit. We want to be able to get more oxygen from the lungs to the working muscle. And it has to be done for long periods of time. Yeah. We're talking 22 hours a day. So basically you have to live up there, and then the other 2 hours a day it's assumed that you're training at a low altitude where you can stress the muscles effectively
so
with
Chad,
plenty of oxygen.
People who buy these things and say, okay, I'm going to do my high intensity workout and limit the air during it.
Yeah, so you're missing it on every front.
It's exactly opposite.
It's exactly the opposite. So really, if you find one of those devices that actually limits the concentration or tweaks the concentration of oxygen, go ahead and wear it 20 hours a day. Be Bane, basically. That you're going to have to live this lifestyle. Take it off, go do your training, come back, put it back on.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's backwards. And that's why there's a benefit to living high, because you can spend more time at this point where you need that. But then when to reinforce this point of training low, and the importance of that is, since you have more readily available oxygen that you can take up, that sort of thing, you can, usually put out more power. And as a result, what happens is you can bring about desired adaptations more easily. You can go through and recover in between interval sets, in between work intervals a little faster. You can get higher quality training, and then you can go and get those benefits that you need. But like you said, it takes a lot. So it's
and even the altitude, the adaptation that takes place, the increase in your red blood cells and the bump in your hematocrit, that's like a 4-week minimum. So most of the studies that are worth reading takes 4 weeks. I mean, it happens at 3 weeks. And then a lot of them put the low end at the minimum requirement at 4 weeks.
So Jonathan, you mentioned, are there some? So I was part of a study. Dr. Jeff Angerman at UNR.
We're doing hyperoxic training.
Yep, where he was trying to see if this was safe, and I would do a workout. I think I was running. I was running on a treadmill, and I did it once at like sea level, but I didn't know which. Like they put the mask on me.
Blind study.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the air came through, and I did it once at not sea level, at our elevation here. And I did the next time at actually more oxygen than sea level.
So higher oxygen concentration per volume.
Yep. Yeah. And it was blind for me, but I knew, because I was like, this is amazing. I feel so great.
It allows you to it's a bigger stimulus.
Yeah. I could run so much faster. And I think they wanted to make a product out of it, but with indoor training, I would have to have an oxygen tank there, which would be kind of weird.
Yeah, we should follow up with him.
I would love to have that if it was safe.
Yeah.
So are there products that do this?
So there was one product that I saw that was rumored to do this, or that was said that like the intent, they said there are other products that can do the opposite and provide more oxygen. But I don't know if they're just literally talking about an oxygen mask. I don't know what they were talking about. So if you're listening to this podcast right now and you know of one, let us know.
I don't think you can just go buy oxygen.
No, it's not that easy.
It's combustible, isn't it?
Sure,
like
it's
pure
not that
oxygen.
simple either.
It's extremely dangerous.
You need a prescription if you're like.
I think that you have to have some sort of permitting even in certain spots to be able to have oxygen tanks in a home.
I know in Leadville they have those little like oxygen tanks you can buy, but that's so little.
Yeah.
Like
exactly.
very, 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 very little.
Yeah, and I'm still unclear on how forcing more oxygen into the system actually yields better performance. So I'd definitely like to understand more about hyperoxic training.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff.
Jeff will tell you.
I'm going to follow up with him.
Cool.
Yeah, this is a good reminder.
Let's get into the last one for this podcast this week, and then if you're with us live, stick with us, ask your questions, and we'll answer them for the time that we'll be able to thereafter. This one comes from Andrew, and he says, anyone in this group, and this is actually one that was posted into our Facebook podcast group, but we figured we'd address it here. It says, anyone in this group with thoughts about how your pelvic tilt affects your power output? I have a pronounced posterior tilt, which means that his pelvis is basically like rolled backward, right? Which I think is the worst possible pelvic position, he says. I am seeing a physical therapist, and I'm doing an array of exercises to help. But I'm interested in how an anterior tilt, meaning that like the pelvis would be rotated forward on that saddle, would affect it as well. You, Chad, you're kind of an example of a person that's very neutral, and pronounced. Like I would say that it's like pronounced. It's like you can see it's visually different.
Yeah. So from a distance, you can see my pelvis isn't tipped. It's still an anterior tilt, but it's a subtle one. So kind of in the vein of Tony Martin, and I think Fabian Cancellara had a pretty flat platform.
They're okay.
Yeah.
Good company.
I'm not saying because
Chad's just
because
lumping
I have
himself
this
in with
tilt.
those guys.
No,
And
I
Brad
wish
Pitt.
it were that easy.
And Tom Brady.
Brad Pitts.
But
John Wayne.
So Andrew's in like the
Abraham
worst.
Lincoln. Sorry, Chad.
And Andrew's coming at it from the worst angle because with that posterior tilt, when you think of him on the saddle with his pelvis tipping back toward the wings of the saddle, and then him trying to get into a low position, he's folding himself over, killing that hip angle, restricting his breathing. Even the blood flow becomes an issue when it gets that crunched up. So I do think this is a worthwhile way to invest your time, see if you can do anything to ameliorate that a bit. But with that said, Tony Martin, who has a very neutral-ish position, doesn't have that big anterior forward tilt where the whole body is rotated forward. They actually tried to do that for him, bring everything forward, increase that tilt effectively, but carry the body with it. and he had poor performance because of it. So he goes back to his more natural position, and whether it's a result of that's how he trains, so that's what works for him, or that's what works for him, so that's how he trains, who cares? We know what works for him. They tried to tweak it, didn't benefit his performance.
So if you think of triathletes are very good examples of like anterior, it's not necessarily tilt, it's just their whole body's moved in that position,
Yeah, see,
but really forward
they're rotating
position.
the whole system, though. They're not just asking them to tip the pelvis forward and then get in that excessively low position.
And the key point, you bring up a great point, is the fact that they don't have the same rules in triathlon that govern cyclists. So
that's true too.
They can rotate that body. Whereas if you're just bound by UCI rules and you're trying to rotate that pelvis forward because you feel like it would open up your hip angle, you might get into a position where you're not in a spot where you can effectively put out power. It's kind of it's a really tricky balance. So it's a great example of you just seeing one thing that a certain athlete does, taking that in a vacuum and applying it to yourself without considering.
Yeah, I mean, we all want to look like Tony Martin, but it doesn't mean any of us can.
Right.
Or few of us can. Doesn't mean we're going to be able to ride like him.
Few of us. Yeah, just a few. Or this guy. Yeah. But for Nate, are you like an anterior or posterior? Have you ever paid attention to that?
I don't care.
On it? Yeah, you
are
what you are.
I am what I am. It's like those things will drive you crazy. Like if you try to do that.
I didn't even really recognize it until we went to the velodrome and it was pointed out to us.
Yep.
So
something that I have noticed is that as my fatigue increases, I'm pretty neutral. As fatigue increases, I go anterior.
Yeah.
That's very common, though.
Pretty common.
Don't think that if you're listening to this and thinking that might be your case, that's very normal, to be expected. Not necessarily the best thing, but it's to be expected.
It's nothing you should seek, and if you're aware of it, you can hopefully tone it down a bit as you fatigue by paying close attention to it and by training and keeping that in mind when you train. What
I've found is that I get more lower back pain, less ability to put out power effectively when I am rotated really far forward like that. Yeah. When I'm more neutral, I feel like I don't know if it's because my pelvis is more stable or it's just because I train there perhaps more frequently. Like Chad said, who knows if it's because you train there or whatever else. But that's where I feel like I get less back pain, and I also just have more ability to put out power. So yeah, I try to work on that. And I think a lot of that, too, has to do with people. If you feel like you can't be neutral and you're always tilted forward, a lot of the time I see like a lack of flexibility can affect that. Bike fit can also affect this.
And we sit in a position that kind of pulls us anteriorly too, so it's that seated position. It's something that has to be addressed specifically. You can't just hope for the best.
And so takeaway, unless you're experiencing pain or discomfort,
probably leave it alone.
Run it.
There you go.
It's okay. Yep, not a big deal. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Remember, you can submit your training questions at TrainerRoad.com/podcast. Join us for the special episode next week. It's going to be pretty fun with Pete Morris, where we go over...
Because I'm not there.
No. It'll be fun because we get to run Pete through the example ringer, so to speak here. We get to use him as the example. But we're going to lay out his season for all of you live on air. You can join us live for this podcast. Remember, you can do that on our Facebook and YouTube pages. That's usually Thursday at 8 a.m., 8 a.m. Pacific time. And if you are listening to this podcast and you want to talk to other podcast listeners, go to the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast Facebook group. Share the podcast is the best way to help us. This isn't sponsored or anything. This is just, this is part of what we do here at TrainerRoad. So if you share it, that's honestly probably the best way to help it out. And
share TrainerRoad.
And check out what we do at TrainerRoad.
Yeah.
That's absolutely it. So thanks, everybody. We will talk to you soon. If you're with us on the live stream, stick with us. We'll answer those questions. See ya.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
You got Facebook?
I got Facebook.
I'll go YouTube. Chad's working on that pelvic tilt right now. Okay, so somebody is recommending that we have Todd Wells join us as our fourth member for 24 Hours in Old Pueblo. I agree.
That's a ringer of a ringer.
I think that would be quite fast. So the RV rental company says from Epic Ride's website, RV Rental Outlet is good. They're about 15 minutes from Phoenix Airport, maybe 2-hour drive from there to 24-hour town. Cool.
Nice.
Cool. That's pretty good.
Stuart Lee asks, what are the 3 things you think were the most important for prepping for Leadville? What were they? Arriving 1 week in advance, pre-race carb loading, caffeine pills, on-race nutrition, certain gear setup, team support. I mean, it's
a good question.
I don't know, but I think it's someone else said something about this too. They said if you're stopping at aid stations, you might as not have faster tires. You know what I mean? Like this kind of,
I see what they mean.
If you spend too much time at aid stations, why do faster tires?
But the point is the tires are still going to affect you if you stop at aid stations or not.
Exactly. So
yeah.
I think it's a combination of if everything gives me 1% and I get a 5% boost, and 2, I wax my chain, I waxed my cassette too. It's the combination of all of them, and I really think out of those things, being there in advance really helped. The carb loading and then eating enough while I raced are probably the big ones.
And how could you have done it without being supported, though? I mean, because we didn't see any
Drop
evident
bags.
aid stations, drop bags.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
You do drop bags, and they put it all overnight, and you stop and get all those.
Okay.
Somebody's asking if you ran togs. You did not, because there's no real clear way to set them up with your XTR brakes without possibly losing a finger.
It's probably the same things on my bike. You have to put them pretty close to the stem and just use them for that arrow kind of position.
Yeah, I almost asked to do that last minute, so I could kind of be super arrow, but that's actually pretty tiring.
It is a tiring position, which it'd be nice to have the togs there, because then it would relieve a little bit of the...
Especially with a dropper.
Yep.
Drop it
like
and rest on those. Quite
2-hour race. We're going to do probably like 90-minute mountain bike races coming up, and there's the one I'm thinking of has flat sections. That would be perfect. Because I'm not going to get tired over that 90 minutes.
Hardtail course.
Did you put put your hands on your fork at any point?
No.
Did you put your hands close to your stem in the central part of your
sure.
bars? And how much time did you spend there?
Not much. When I was pulling a group, I'd get
Gotcha.
into that section and into that position.
But otherwise, it doesn't make sense really to be in there if you're back in a pace line or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. When you have a pace line, I just want to rest. Relax and try to get behind a big person.
As comfortable as you can.
Someone's also recommending Jeff Kabush for that he join us for their 24-hour.
I don't need you guys. Todd Wells, Jeff Kabush, me.
That's it.
You'll ride 15 minutes for their 2 hours.
I probably just one lap. They could do the rest, and we'd win.
You'd let them know that it's all base training for them, right? Yeah, build it up. Let's see.
Someone says my body language really shows my fatigue.
You are pretty folded over.
I have these huge bags under my eyes too.
Yeah, I'm tired.
I think I should have scheduled Monday, Tuesday off and just more rested.
What did you do Monday, Tuesday?
Worked. Well, Monday I was an all-day event.
You mean off from work?
Yeah. I had an all-day seminar, which is those things are tiring too.
Yeah. Somebody says, love the podcast. Interesting topic for discussion. As a highly trained athlete in a different sport, running, would that raise my potential or ceiling as a cyclist? And is this measurable? From Ryan. We get that question a lot with people wondering if there's crossover.
Yeah, I mean, there's central carryover. I mean, how much blood your heart pumps, how aerobically fit your muscles are, and a lot of those things carry over, but they're different fiber recruitment, different joint actions. So I mean, there's similarity, but first off, running is a weight-bearing exercise, and there's a whole lot of impact that you don't get when all you do is sit on a bike and pedal concentrically. All you're doing is pressing, relaxing. With running, it's contract, and then that eccentric contraction that bears weight, that's a whole different stress on the body, and that doesn't carry to cycling at all. That eccentric capability you have from running doesn't benefit you at all on the bike. But you can have a big engine, and if you have a big VO2 max and you start to work on your cycling, you probably have a higher ceiling.
That's what we see is people who are great have a big engine, they go to another sport, and initially they're horrible, right? And then but they usually come up a lot faster than everyone else. Bradley Wiggins, he's rowing now. Right? Rowing and cycling, that's two completely different things. But he has such a huge aerobic engine.
A lot of carryover there.
I believe he's trying to make the Olympic team.
He was. I think that dream's died.
But still.
But yes.
That just shows you, even to have the, not getting laughed out, right? Totally. As a cyclist, that these things can happen. So if you are if you're like a 2:30 marathoner and you want to be a cyclist, I would be you are going to do well. You're going to do well.
Yeah. Barrier of entries drop down.
Yeah.
Higher probability, that's for sure.
Speaking of that, I don't know if it was Rob Craw or somebody. Somebody, I guess, is a very famous ultra runner that did Leadville, and people were painting it to be like he just hopped on a mountain bike for the first time. Apparently, he has an injury that's stopping him from running right now, so he said he was going to do the mountain bike race. People were kind of painting it like it's the first time he's jumped on a mountain bike, but I saw him now. I know who it is. I saw him go through the aid station, sitting upright, taking a jacket off through rocky terrain and putting that jacket into his jersey pocket. So he's a good rider.
Boy knows how to ride a bike.
It's not like his first rodeo here, but he, I think, got 14th overall. So pretty cool to see.
And there you go.
There you go. That's a good example of it.
Yeah, and you can bet he did the work necessary though.
Totally.
He didn't just hop on the bike that day and say, I got a big engine, I'll make it work.
Exactly. Yeah. Michael asks a cadence mountain bike question. Doing TrainerRoad workouts at 70 to 80 cadence rather than 95 plus. When I look at race files, I'm usually in the mid 80s. So doing workouts at 100 plus seems counterproductive. So there's two parts of this. And actually, I'm glad that you brought this up, because if you've watched the recent World Cup that just happened in Mont Saint Anne, watch the women's race. You can learn so much from that one. Look at Yolanda Neff. Dear me, she's creating a hurricane from how quickly she spins those pedals. Versus, so she ran, I want to say she was running a 32, but she was running the new XTR cassette that went all the way up to a 51, and she was using those gears, and she spins very well. Yeah. That's what she does best. That's how she trains. Yeah. She's figured that out. That's where she's at.
I'm all for training like you race, but how you race, is that the best way for you to race?
And that's just it. Yeah. Right? Like, it doesn't necessarily mean Yolanda does that. I could totally see her at some point in her career shifting to a less, extreme cadence range, right? Maybe she shifts, and maybe she finds she works out somewhere slightly differently. Then Anton Cooper is running a 40-tooth chainring. 40, that's like massive, especially for that course. It's so steep, right? So everybody runs things slightly differently. I'm all for training how you race. However, I typically see in a mountain bike race, a cross-country mountain bike race, my cadence is somewhere around 89, 90, and then that's my average cadence for the race. That's non-zero. But then if I'm doing a road race, it's commonly 100 to 102. So I'm a slightly faster spinner than most. If I'm really grinding up a hill in that moment, I'm probably spinning closer to 80. And I think something a lot of people are guilty of doing is they pay attention to their cadence when they recognize that it's abnormal, and then they start to paint a broad picture based on that one data point. So they're like, oh, my cadence, I'm always so low on climbs, but it's just a short little stint. So like maybe that's okay, I think the biggest thing that we've talked about is make sure that you're familiar with a wide range of cadences.
Ideally, especially with mountain biking, because you're going to be all over the place.
Yep. And then I typically find that mountain bikers fall somewhere in the high 80s on average. So with their racing. So,
Chad, this is for you. How do you recover from a race like Leadville and work this into training? Start back in the base plan, leave time before starting another plan?
It depends what your goals are next. First off, I'd take a whole week off. Something like that's going to beat you up in a big way. And then you chase it with, an all-day conference and then back to the grind immediately into it. So I don't think you're going to benefit in any way from a training perspective by doing anything in this week that immediately follows it. And then it's just going to depend on what's coming next, which for you sounds like cyclocross. So I would probably just maybe do a couple weeks easy if you need to change a pace, and then dive back into a build and then start to specialize relative to cross.
It's always, cross season's always like this rebuild phase is kind of weird because we have less time. We're really busy during the fall. Yeah. I think the biggest point is I have this desire. I even thought about I should start doing some easy rides right now. Like I don't want to spend time off the bike, but I feel like I should recover first.
You can go do some long, slow stuff. I think that'd be a vast benefit
25 minutes?
25 minutes stuff.
No, really, like even 30 minutes sounds.
No, I mean long, slow, like go out for a weekend ride or park it on the trainer.
Right now when I don't feel like...
No, not this week.
Oh, okay.
When you start to get back into it.
Got it.
Yeah, right now if you do anything, I'd keep it like 20, 30-minute easy spins just to get the lymph flowing.
If a percentage of FTP, how low?
50, 60 tops. Yeah, I would keep it. I would ride as I feel, so to speak. Just if it feels easy, that's what I ride at. If that's 40%, whatever. If it's 60%, great.
Somebody asks, is Leadville not a great example of the limitations of a one-by? A double, or dare I say a triple, he's talking about the front chain rings, would give you greater range, but also closer ratios for those late race fatigued climbs. When you have a 12-speed like Eagle setup, or you have like the 12-speed Shimano, the new stuff from XTR, I really don't think the closer ratio things is a problem. I don't find it to be. I mean, maybe if you're in pace lines in a pack and you're trying to hold in, that's the only time that I've noticed where it becomes slightly difficult.
Yeah, I mean, you get the same range with the 1x and 12-speed.
Yeah, so then what you do get with a triple, you can get a triple, sure, and you can probably get more range, but you get a lot more complexity and chance for things to go wrong. Part of the beauty of a one-by is that it's simple, and that you reduce the fact that you don't have a front shifter that can go wrong. You don't have chain rings that can get bashed or drop. You aren't changing your chain over in front ever, so there's less chance of having a drop chain since you have a clutch derailleur. So there's a lot of like pluses to having a one-by. It doesn't mean that a double isn't a bad choice. It could certainly work just fine. But a one-by now, since we have this wider range, I do think, and more gears, I think it's fine.
It's the only way to go.
Yeah.
Here's a good question from Jared, and I'm going to paraphrase it. He's doing cross-country race with stages, segments, and he's asking how slow he should go between and how much time recovery he needs. This would be great for enduro racers too. But if you have a choice of how much time you can put between stages, how much do you actually need?
That depends on your fitness. I mean, you can bounce back rather quickly if you're highly aerobically fit. Nutrition's obviously a big component of that too. So if the stages are long and you actually need interim nutrition, how long is it going to take for you to digest that? I'm not sure there's a or a quick, easy answer here.
It's definitely for me a direct component of aerobic fitness, right? Like that's what I've noticed.
Yeah, I mean, if it's short and hard, there's just a lot of variables here.
Why would you ever want to speed through the transfers?
There's no point.
If it gets hot, really, really hot later in the day, conditions change.
Actually. Yeah, 2 reasons. Like an enduro race, especially, like if you have dust issues and people that are slower in front of you, because the rule is in enduro, if somebody's coming up on you, you have to move over. However, they're famous at not very, people are kind of out of their mind and like so focused on not dying that they don't really care about pulling over. So that's a great point. A lot of the time you'll see riders take off very early. Sometimes start order is mandated though, and you have to kind of follow that. But that would be one reason that I would do that. I'm actually going to be doing one day of the North Star Enduro coming up. So we'll see how that sort of thing goes. But
so you're talking about like in the case of an enduro where you're doing a shortish sort of effort and then trying to get to the next one, but trying not to hamper performance in the next one.
Same with the cross country stuff. Yeah, same one.
Yeah. I think that it's absolutely like I see that when I recover faster between those stages, it's because I have more time building up that aerobic engine and making sure that I'm aerobic.
Yeah, so fit. Fitness, cooling, nutrition. I mean, it all depends on what you need from each of those.
I would say obviously when you feel recovered, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be over 10 minutes to feel completely recovered. If you go like cross country, it could be 10, 20 minutes stage.
Yeah, and these enduro events specifically are highly anaerobic. So the replenishment of that system is going to take you 10, 15 minutes. So
yep, it'll take some time for sure. Every once in a while they hand like basically kind of like a prize or a preem to the first person done on the day. So they will hand that out. So if that's your motivation, sure, you can do that. But so that's what I would say. I'm kind of excited about racing that enduro, by the way.
You should be.
Yeah, it should be fun. There was another race I think that had Stetna's race. Are we going to do that?
I don't
Stetna
like that.
Sierra Prospect?
Nope. The downhills are too fast with too many people. I'm going to go way over 50. Don't like it.
It's all split up with stages. It's an enduro format.
I know.
On the road? Yeah. Yeah, it's an enduro format on the road.
Yeah, I'm not doing that.
So you're not doing it, huh?
It's
Sounds
long,
like a long day.
It's hard, and I don't like I don't like going 55 miles per hour on a downhill with a lot of people.
I don't even know if there are downhill stages.
No, but
I don't think there are.
Yeah,
I think it's flat stages, rolling stages, and then climbing stages.
Let's take a look at it.
So you can just cruise at whatever speed you want.
89 miles. It's like a Le Mans loop.
It looks awesome. I wish that I was ready to do it, man. It looks like a ton of fun. So
it looks like fun if you're into that kind of thing.
It's just nice because it's a race. I think it's the race format that all races are going to have. Haute Route Rockies did it too this year. It's enduro format. Like you have point A to point B by the end of the day or a loop.
Sounds
but
fun.
only portions of it are times. Then you can collect, hang out with your friends, do whatever else you need to do, soft pedal in between stages.
That actually sounds kind of cool.
Yeah, right. I like that. So,
Joseph asked what TR plan. So I was doing, mostly for the year, I was doing just sweet spot over and over and over again. And then leading into this, I did a climbing road race. And I liked that a lot. And that was kind of it gave me enough I needed some more like punch for crit racing, and I was doing so much sweet spot that I wasn't doing anything anaerobic or VO2 max, or even very much threshold.
You can only milk the sweet spot cow for so long too, because the only way to make sweet spot more effective is to keep increasing the amount you're doing, and at some point you're going to hit a ceiling. And, time's going to limit you and your ability to recover. And
it's so much fun when you change energy systems, like you
fun.
work at one for a while, and then you get to get a different kind of workout.
Might be hard at first.
Body needs a new stimulus, and your brain needs a change of pace.
Exactly, yeah.
All right, let's cut it right there. If you are going to be joining us next week, we hope you are. I saw a lot of questions about people asking about off-season stuff. I reserved those ones because we're going to be talking a lot about what to do in the transition between seasons and how to plan a season next week with Pete Morris from Cliff Bar Racing. So stay tuned for that one. That'll be next week. That's Thursday, 8 a.m. Pacific. so you can join us at the typical time. Thanks for joining us live, everybody. Really appreciate this. Share it out with your friends and join us in the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast Facebook group. We'll talk to you all soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.